Greetings, everyone. I hope you're all having a great time wherever you are. Today is a special day for us as a movement, as a YMCA. It is the 6th of June. It's our anniversary. And of course, we have today a very special initiative to be uncovered with a very special person, our YMCA Heritage Gatekeeper, Adi Davis. Welcome, Adi.
Thanks, Andy. I think that's a bit too generous. Maybe just YMCA geek or guy who had too much time on his hand and read a couple of books would be more appropriate. But happy to be here with you and happy 6th of June to everybody who's tuning in or watching this on rewatch. And it's strange for me to be on this side of the screen, I guess, not asking the questions, but sharing a little bit today. So thanks, Andy.
No, it is amazing, AD. I think the work that you've been doing for the YMCA as a consultant has been incredible. The heritage is also something that we need to sort of focus more on, and it's something that our movement really needs to shed more light on. And I feel like putting the puzzle together has been a really challenging work for especially for us because we take it for granted, and we have so much more out there that needs to be uncovered. And if you'd like to discuss a little bit, just to give a bit of a briefing and a bit of a context to the audience, how did the whole heritage sort of initiative started?
Well, I think it was back when the Berlin event was in its stages of kind of the idea formation and the working groups. And during 175, I was part of the heritage group that was led by Ken and Ryan Bean and people like that. And even though I didn't contribute a lot, the process was fantastic. And I thought the exhibition that they had at 175 was great. So when I heard of the rumblings of Berlin, I just started with asking a question in terms of, what heritage items are going to be there. You can find throughout history of YMCA that, at certain events, there's certain medallions or medals produced. I think for the 150th world anniversary, there was a collaboration with Coca-Cola. So like, there's always something that's pretty special. And with it being 50 years of YMCA Europe, and of course, today is the 6th of June. It's 180, but we're still in the 50th year of the Area Alliance. So I think it was just me asking questions. And I think in credit to Marius and to Juan, I was asked whether I could start to pull some stuff together. But I didn't realize, Juan described it as an odyssey the other day in an email to me. I don't think people realize the state of the archives at the European level. So one of the challenges was straight away is what have we got? And the answer was nothing. There didn't seem to be anything digitalized beyond the last decade. So when you're trying to deal with 5 decades worth of history, there's a problem. The seat of YMCA Europe had been moved a few times, and I guess in that moving, archives had been trimmed down or stuff had been filed or moved away. And it was really there really wasn't anything out there at all. So starting out was basically an internet link, and Googling things will only get you so far. But I noticed that there was a massive gap in just kind of basic information. For example, like when and where the General Assemblies were. There should be 50. We didn't have them. Speeches of different leaders. We seem to have a lot of Juan and Johann's speeches, but nothing from kind of earlier. And I think this was just one of those things where perhaps people have been archiving, perhaps there was the digital revolution a few years ago, and stuff had just flown under the radar. But I have to point out at this point, it was by speaking to Vardan and to Martina that really kind of put me in the right direction. And those two staff members have obviously served a long time. YMCA Europe knew their history, knew a lot of the history lay in the working groups and events, and also kind of give me a heads up of what was in or what wasn't in the archives, physical archives in Prague. And I think one of the things that we've not managed to achieve was to crack open those Prague archives and get them down to Geneva. But I live in hope that somebody will do that at some point in the future. So Yeah, that's kind of why it started, and also how it started, and again started with nothing, Andy.
Well, I guess this is the beauty of the YMCA. We somehow managed to make something with very little resources. And you just mentioned, also the actual headquarters of the World YMCA has been an invaluable spot for us. The Vatican has their basement, World YMCA has their basement. And if you could give us some insights of of your work over there, uncovering the bits of history and like the early finds and something that kind of we find very interesting down there.
I have to also specify that there wasn't a budget for this. I think it was kind of a side hustle, side project, and there was no resources. So, sometimes it's better to apologize instead of asking for permission. So, heading over to Portugal for a movement strengthening um, meeting, and the flight patterns to Portugal are difficult from Kosovo. So a common spot was Geneva, and I just kind of made sure I stayed within the budget of the travel, but then asked a favor of the World Alliance to go and spend a couple of days there. And I thought if some of the heritage that we're looking for, it must be in the Geneva archives. And people like Claude Allan, who was there and has been there and just retired recently. He was a great source, again, but limited due to his health and working days. So, there's that old saying, if you want anything doing, go and do it yourself. So headed over to Geneva, and it was interesting because when how the archives are, they're all in these little kind of cardboard boxes, all dated and numbered. And when I arrived there was a box missing, and it just happened to be the YMCA Europe like 73, which is the most important box, was missing, and it had everything leading up to it and everything after it. And Claude Allen said, "Oh, I think I'm not going to name names, but somebody was here from YMCA Europe. They were having a look to see what was in the box, and probably the box was placed back in the archives in the wrong position." And I
Ooh.
was like, "Are you kidding me?" So the first job I had was to go and scan and read the boxes in the archives to relocate the 73 box, which I did. And I think Claude Allen was very impressed. But I managed to find the box and put it in its rightful place. But while I was there, as well as uncovering some of the gems that we found and some of the documents and some of the dates of things that are really important, Carlos asked if I would help Claude Allan with a project that he was doing for the anniversary, which was creating a photo album. Now, as I told you, there was not photos. A lot of photos had come from people's personal Facebooks, or they'd sent them, or we'd had one or two lying around. In fact, the background here is all historical kind of European photos. But one of the great pleasures of this project was working with Claude Allan and trying to curate 50 images that kind of told the story of YMCA Europe and its development through the last 5 decades. And when you get to work with somebody like Claude Allan, it's just a chance to sit and sit under the learning tree. But also, I saw that as a great use of my time in Geneva for one day, because we didn't have the photos, we didn't have anything, and to be able to work with one of my heroes in the YMCA. And well, the good thing is that this album was printed, and there was a copy given to Juan, and he has that. I don't know what he's done with it, but I've got a copy. They sent me a second copy, and I've got Juan to sign my copy. So I'll keep hold of that until we know what we're doing with the archives, and then I'll send it on appropriately. But we've also made a PDF digital version of these 50 images, and the 50 images are available to be downloaded. And they go right back to when, Egon first got the job and had his professional portfolio photo taken, right through to, modern day things like crossing the bridge to Ukraine and some of the Ukrainian response work from YMCA Europe. So it really does try to capture who we are and what we've been doing this 50 years with limited access to photographs. Because I think the other thing I should say is that it has been a bit of a difficult task. And again, without naming names, there were some people who were really helpful, as I mentioned, but there was also some people that either didn't want to share or perhaps had not left the YMCA on good terms. And perhaps they were a little bit more reluctant to share what they had, or had lost it, or had not been filed safely. And I don't blame anybody for how they leave the YMCA, but I do think it's our responsibility for all of us to try and tell the story as well as we can for the next generation of leaders and the next generation of people. It's always important to know where you've come from. So yeah, the photo album was a great thing, and I think that was a nice ending to working with Claude Allen at the end of his career, but also something nice for the future of YMCA Europe to look back on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think our gratitude should definitely go to Claude Alain and his work. I think without him, we mentioned you as a gatekeeper of our heritage. I think he's the gatekeeper of the world YMCA heritage. I think I had the pleasure to meet him briefly when I was also in Geneva last year. And it has been an amazing opportunity to just discuss, reconnect, and again share some of those tiny bits and insights that you don't necessarily learn within your local or regional YMCA. And then you start to realize how small the world is and how huge our organization and how interconnected it is. Also yourself, you have a background in the YMCA, and you could tell, from youth worker to having the ability to meet the world is just it's such a wholesome experience overall. And also it is so invaluable, and when we look back to those albums, they tell not only the story of the YMCA, but there's also a little bit of ourselves in those pictures, in those stories, in everything. So I think it's not just like the YMCA stories, it is our stories, like connecting people, and of course initiatives, programs worldwide. I think, yeah, it's a fantastic initiative. And apart from the albums, pictures tell stories. We also try to focus on the actual testimonials and testimonies of people, leaders from across our movements. And you said it has been a real challenge oftentimes, and it's really something that we should applaud. And again, congratulate you once more for the incredible achievement of interviewing leaders and presidents from across our movement. How was the process? Like, how did you what were
Well,
the
I
main
think
challenges? How did you approach it?
yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's like over 6 hours worth of
Mm.
like interviews just from this heritage. And again, starting with the past presidents, the current president, and a couple of staff members. And I think you said it at the beginning. We could go much further and much more deeper with all this work, but it does need resource, and it does need budgets, and it does need a little bit of attention. And there's only so much you can do with an internet connection in Kosovo. But to your question, I think it was a couple of months into the kind of the reading and the researching, and I think we'd lost some great people. You mentioned Claude Allen, but we'd lost some great leaders who'd either passed away during the pandemic time or around that time, or retired. And being good friends with people like Ken Montgomery, you know, and uh, and Terry Radcliffe, to see that people had retired or passed on, and so much institutional memory and stories had gone with those people. And I think we just asked the question within our team at YMCA Europe, like, but why did nobody ever sit down with them and get them on tape, or ask them a question, or ask them to write something down? Not everybody wants to write a book, but everybody has a story. And I said to Marius, I think what we can do is we can try and interview some of the past presidents and to get them on tape. And that was a big challenge in itself, because firstly you have to kind of try and piece together what it is that they achieved during their time in the role. But for a lot of the people who were involved, it wasn't just being president. There was also kind of their YMCA career before they became the president, or other working groups, or being the treasurer. And again, the other thing that you're dealing with is not everybody wants to be interviewed. So there was people who had concerns over how footage would be used, or how they'd be seen in the future. There was people who declined an interview. There was people who didn't want to do it
Mhm.
over the Zoom format, who wanted to drop in and and record them live on the balcony with a beer. I mean, it's all wonderful. And again, we're limited by what we can and cannot achieve. But some of the challenges was definitely tying down people to a date. I do think the interviews they took much longer for me to do than I'd hoped, and that was a scheduling conflict, that was a timing conflict, that was a what just life thing.
Mhm.
Um, but there is gold in them, and I think I hope they'll serve the movement. I'm not expecting millions and millions or even thousands and thousands of views, but I'm hoping that they'll form going forward um, a different account of what happened during the time. And there's some great interviews. The interview with Mike Will was probably my favorite. A guy that was very honest and open, very didn't pull his punches. Maybe having a friendship with him, a bit of mentorship there helped. Just was just great, and that was great. But also, people like Jan Neeson that I'd never spoken to. He'd been at the same conferences, but he's telling you stories about how the key for the city of Little Mishel was still wet with gold paint, and just recalling these great moments. And I asked people about their heroes and who had encouraged them, and to hear some of our senior leaders just kind of gracefully kind of bring other people to the front and say, "Well, I was encouraged," and I just, it was just such a lovely experience. And hand in hand with that, when trying to find the presidents. So if you go back to some of the annual reports, the thinking, and I think the general feeling, not
Mhm.
from everybody, was that Terry Radcliffe was the first president. And it
Mhm.
even came up in an interview or in conversations where it was like, oh, there was a guy before Terry, but we don't know his name or we don't know what happened to him. And in the end, there was 9 flipping presidents that we had to find. And
Yeah.
nobody could remember them, who they were from,
Mhm.
even some of the movements. And I have to say that the difficult one was finding Albert was finding the first president back in 73, and nobody knew his name. Nobody had a picture of him, and we found him in the archives. We found all the paperwork, excellent minutes that was kept. So we got to mention here that Albert, the first president,
Mhm.
people didn't know his name, where he was from. There was some records online if you kind of Googled his name, but there was no pictures. And I have to
Mhm.
mention YMCA Germany, particularly Marion here. There was others in YMCA Germany that helped sending stuff through and responding to emails. She managed to find a picture of him when he was, I think it was 22, 23. And that's the photo that we've gone with because there's no other photos.
Mhm.
But trying to find that final president and the other guys, I'll tell one quick story.
Mhm.
There's Kajlu Pedersen from Denmark was one of our presidents as well. And when I reached out to the YMCA, I tried to Google him again, nothing. And I have a great connection with the Danish wise man. I sent one of my friends in the wise man this name and said, "Can you help?" And literally within about 12 minutes, they'd sent me his bio, 3 pictures, and what happened to him. And I was like, what a fantastic network this is. So to find the presidents and to be able to now count it from the beginning for 50 years, that's done. And it's the same with the General Assemblies. To find those locations, to find where they were, it's done. To find the sports results, to find the scouting results, to find, everything that we've done, but is perhaps just not documented or kept somewhere. And now it's in 1 or 2 kind of great lists. I think is important. I think it's important because as the pictures behind us, we're not doing so many different things than we did 50 odd years ago. I mean, we try and be revolutionary with our logos and our colors and our fades, but essentially we're doing the similar kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, as you remember in Geneva when we went down in the basement, we were just looking at the pictures and all the albums, and we were just thinking, this is literally us. Instead of like old pieces of like newspapers and magazines, now we have like social media, newsletters, we have our emails. it's just incredible how we just changed the medium, but the essence, the actual, the people, the activities, everything is still the same, which, again, it comes to show how much of a consistency we have within our organization. Even though we do a bit of everything, we kind of we stick to our mission and vision. And of course, it's this is the anniversary year, so we need to sort of think what would be like the key highlight. If you have any particular finding or anything that you'd like to discuss about, anything that stood out, a piece that really wowed you in the process, that would be, I think, very invaluable for everyone watching this.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's a particular piece, but there are some interesting things, and I think a lot of what was recovered was also through the way back when machine on the
Mhm.
internet and going back through old websites and recovering documents that I don't know where they are now, but at some point in time they existed, and some of the interesting things that we found was, a 1979 Council of Europe training led by Egon Slopianka, the first general secretary, with young people from the Mediterranean, where they were asking the same questions that we're asking 50 years later. Who are we? How relevant are we? All these kind of things. The point of a federation, the point of national, the point of the area alliance. Other things as well. There was some great, I know people don't like annual reports, but there's some great annual reports that we retrieved from the early days. There was, certain discussion papers and documents about, moving the seat, starting out to build the training center. There was, the Sapphire Report, which was the big kind of money project from the US. We managed to recover the report, field group and working group reports. YUSA, Ryan Bean over there, fantastic in helping us track down some of the development of the Mediterranean YMCAs and that cluster back in the 80s was just great. Was just great pieces of content. Other things, people like Egon's speech, I think is cool. Festival songs that probably people remember, but we didn't have the recording. There's just all kinds of bits and pieces there. But I think what we're able to do now is to tell a story of who we are or what we've tried to achieve in 5 decades. And it's interesting because, as I said, nothing changes. I never felt after reading the history that we had much money as a European alliance. We were always asking, but that goes hand in hand with who we are. I always feel as an area alliance, we've been responsive rather than cutting edge leading
Mhm.
across the continent. And if that's what we want to do, but we've always been a responsive organization, and that very clearly comes through. Um, as well, when you go into stuff like tensing, there's some great documents recovered from tensing.
Mhm.
Um, that might not be a YMCA Europe thing, but it's definitely a European program. Again, the sports stuff, the scouting, there's just so much there, and I think it's also important to know where you've come from. And I think we're at 50, you know, it's inevitable that there'll be a 75th anniversary, there'll be a 100th anniversary. And,
Mhm.
today is the 6th of June and it's the 180th anniversary. We're putting a spotlight on Europe, but there's so much that's happened within our continent. And our continent, you asked me for an interesting thing. When I was reading about the various movements that we have, I realized that we're beyond the continent of Europe. So, like our furthest eastern local association in history was just above New Delhi in India. So that YMCA is still in the European alliance somehow, or in the European movement. If you go down to the island of Reunion near Madagascar,
Mhm.
they're part of the French YMCA. So again, you're all the way down near Madagascar. We had it at some point in history. We had a YMCA in the Falklands, which is down near Argentina. And then if you look modern times or a little bit earlier, we've got YMCAs operating in Antarctica. So again, when we say European YMCA, it doesn't just cover the EU and South Caucasus and the Eastern Bloc and the continent of Europe. Actually, we've got people all over the world who are somehow still connected weirdly in a area alliance. So just little things like that I think are interesting. Nothing more than interesting, but important to remember. And I guess I would say on that that you've been very complimentary and very generous, but I really did have to shake the tree to get information out of people. And I think I should say thank you while we have the platform. You know, people like Vladdy in the Czech Republic who went and found her Tenzing heritage books and like digitalized them so we could use them as a resource is fantastic. Eckhard and Marion in Germany, happy to delve into their archives and share with us. Ryan Bean over in the US got his team to go and pull up stuff from their archives. You know, everybody else that I've kind of spoken to, you know, people like Peter Posner who went and reached out to Trish Redcliffe to see if there was anything that Terry had left that could be retrieved. You know, just so generous with their time and their energy. I've got to mention people like Ed Edick, who has become a very good WhatsApp friend, just to bounce ideas off him or for him to point me in the right direction. I just think has been so wonderful. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that I've forgotten. And if they're watching this, I just apologize. But I really do think that there was when people are asked to do something, then that's great. And, you know, it was also nice speaking to former staff members as well. I think it's important to say that it's not all rainbows and unicorns, and not everybody leaves the YMCA kind of, yes, on good terms, but perhaps there was things leading up to their exit that angered them or annoyed them, or decisions that have gone since. So I hope for those people who I spoke to but didn't want to contribute, but had the chance to kind of air their grievances or complain to me or moan to me, to be a sounding board. You know, those conversations will stay with me and never be repeated. But I hope there was some closure for the people who perhaps needed that closure. And then, you know, just the other thing, I've been kind of showing off a little bit at YMCA events this last 6 months because if I do devotions or if I lead something, I'll bring up a quote from Aegon or a quote from an old document, and everyone's like, "Ooh, that's good," and I'm like, "Yeah, it was written 50 years ago, so it's got to be good." So you know, in conclusion, I would say that it's probably the European People's Collection. I'm just happy that they've trusted me to do so much with it. Could we have done more? Absolutely. Should the YMCA Europe leadership and team think ahead of time, you know, for next anniversaries? Absolutely. I think a lot of the groundwork has been done. And I also think, you know, 50 years, when you're comparing it to 180 years, like you're still a bit of a baby. So we've got a long way to go. Plenty of things to figure out in terms of our archives, what's important. You know, all those little, you know, Coca-Cola partnerships don't make themselves. But it really was a pleasure to kind of read about stuff and to understand how stuff happened. And I think, you know, history is as much as people give it time for. So, you know, if you want to focus on a certain time period, that's fine. But, you know, 5 decades is plenty of good work that's happened. And YMCA, as we all know, because it's the birthday of the YMCA, has always just been a force for good. And the one thing I should mention is that, you know, the European work didn't start with YMCA Europe. In fact, it wasn't even called YMCA Europe. You can go and read about this on the Heritage website at the beginning. You know, YMCA work across the continent was happening since the beginning, since 1844, and right up until the formation of the Area Alliance in 73, where it kind of started to become its own thing. But it was a transition. But before that, there was World Alliance staff, there was the castle, there was great initiatives, there was, you know, the war work. It's all out there. So it's been a pleasure to read it and to try and understand it. And I just maybe take this opportunity to just thank everybody who's contributed and for the trust, because I'm not a historian, I'm not a gatekeeper yet. But I do just want to thank people for the trust. And hopefully there's something for everybody there. And if there's not, then please find it and send it us. And I'm sure the guys will add it to the collection there that we have. So those are my conclusions, Andy.
No, it's incredible. I mean, to sum up this work is just like there's not enough words to kind of describe and convey everything, like the whole feelings and the whole process. I mean, I think the people who should be thankful is literally our whole team, to yourself and your work, and of course to everyone who wanted to contribute, and even those who didn't want to contribute, but they added a little bit of a tinge of their work in the whole process. I think it's invaluable, equally invaluable, and it's a great. I think as you said, this is a great way to conclude our 5 decades of work, and our anniversary year. And of course, looking back to our heritage, we should just be proud of what we've achieved, and of course, look forward to what is to come. And of course, it's not a cliche. AI is part of our life. We have to adapt it, we have to incorporate it, and we also need to understand how the modern world will coexist with the AI. And for this, we prepared another session. It's going to be on live at 5 o'clock today. So my colleague Sam will be leading the session, and we would advise anyone, young people, young leaders, youth workers, as well as leaders across the YMCA movement, to tune in at 5 o'clock CET, Central European Time. For more updates, there's going to be two very enticing speakers discussing about the topic of AI and the modern world. We're going to have two different perspectives from two different corners of the world. So tune in, and we'll see you there.
Have a great day and happy birthday to everybody watching.
Happy birthday.